Hello, everybody. We have been waiting anxiously for this fabulous event. For months, we've been waiting. So I get the honor of moderating tonight, but first I get to introduce Lindsay Gardner, the author and the artist of Why We Cook. And as an introduction, I'm going to read part of her introduction in the book, and it's amazing. One evening in 2018, while cooking dinner for my family, I started wondering why the kitchen draws me back day after day in much the same way I'm drawn to my art studio. What is it exactly about cooking that makes me feel inspired? Why do I care so much about it? And how does it nourish me in more than the obvious ways? What am I teaching my daughters about the sources, histories, and origins of the food we buy, cook, and put into our bodies? And what will they carry with them as they grow up? What am I teaching them about generosity and self-love? How does this daily ritual on which I expend so much energy relate to my identity as a human, mother, partner, friend, artist, woman? Everyone, please welcome Lindsay Gardner.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's so nice to be here.
This is just a must book for every woman to buy for herself, her mother, her grandmother, her daughter, her granddaughter, for future generations, friends, even not so good friends. This is an amazing book about women on food, identity, and connection. Can you tell us a little bit about the book? How do you see it?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. It's so nice to be with you and for your kind words. I have to say, it's pretty surreal to hear someone read my own words back to me, and in a really good way. How do I see the book? I mean, honestly, I see the book as a conversation, and an ongoing one at that. I think that what really inspired me to make it was obviously all of these questions that I was experiencing in my own life. And when I started to take those questions out of my brain and into my circle of peers, and then beyond that into a wider circle of women all over the country and the world, I realized just how much there was to explore. And honestly, since the book launched in the spring, and through having conversations like this, I realized how that conversation just keeps going. So really, I think that there is, as much as there is in these pages, one of the most exciting things to me about the book is how it sparks conversation and how it leads to hopefully readers asking themselves a lot of questions that can help them explore cooking and the meaning of food in their own lives.
Well, I loved how you have like a group of chefs. They talk about their most memorable meal, but then there's a section where you're asking, well, what's your comfort food? What's your favorite ingredient? What's your favorite tool in the kitchen? What are you looking forward to in the future? So how did you put this all together? I'm just like everything that you want to know in here. So how did you come up with the how you laid it out and everything?
Well, I started working on it in 2018, so it definitely didn't happen overnight. And a lot of my questions for the contributors started from questions that I was thinking about from the standpoint of sort of how my art practice overlapped with the creative practice of being a chef or a food writer, and what draws people into those experiences and those jobs and those passions. I mean, I think that one of the interesting things about the book is that it includes the voices of home cooks, and that also was really interesting and powerful to me, because as we all know, home cooks are sort of the silent other part of all cookbooks. And it was it was really important to me to sort of have all of those women's voices included in one place together. And so I knew from the beginning that I wanted this book to cover a huge range of voices, not just in terms of geographic location, but also in terms of profession or, you know, cooking as not a profession. I also wanted to include a huge, vast range of diverse voices, women who are well-known, women who are not as well-known. So that sort of value from the beginning helped me drive the structure and how everything else came together.
Now, how did you find everyone? How did you choose them?
Well, that was probably one of the most challenging parts, because this is good news, as I'm sure no one is surprised to hear, but there could be multiple volumes of this book. There are so many incredible women all over the world doing powerful and interesting and passionate and impactful work. So choosing who was in the book was one of my biggest challenges. And as I mentioned before, it was sort of trying to balance in terms of who, like what kinds of people were represented in different jobs and different places, and different ages and backgrounds. And so it was an ongoing process. I mean, I added contributors as late as fall of 2020 to the book, and the book came out in spring 2020. Oh, sorry, fall of 2019. 2020 didn't really happen, right?
Nope.
Sorry, the book came out in earlier this year. So it was fall of 2020. Anyway, yeah. I was adding contributors until the fall before it came out. And because as happens in this community of people, you're constantly finding out about more people doing interesting things in this landscape. And so I really wanted to celebrate that with the book and with my art.
What was the most surprising thing that you learned?
I mean, there were so many surprising things that happened along the way. And to your earlier point, I think, you know, I'm not part of the food world. And so when I started doing the research and reaching out to people, I was lucky because I lived in Oakland, California at the time, which is, you know, right at the heart of so much happening in the culinary world. And so there were people that I met that were right there in my backyard who helped introduce me to other people. And that was definitely a strong network that got the research started. But then I would say probably 70% of the rest of my research was just straight up cold calling and emailing. So I'm a very persistent person, and I'm really friendly. And I think that I was really genuine in asking the questions that I was asking from a really like genuinely curious place. And I think that there was something compelling to the people that I reached out to, because I was not part of that classic food world persona. I wasn't a food journalist. I wasn't a food writer or a critic or anything. I was reaching out to them from the standpoint of being a fellow creative, a woman, a passionate home cook, you know. So I think that there was something just different enough about that people were compelled to be part of it. And I feel so fortunate that so many women said yes to the project. So I would say that probably one of the most surprising things to me was just how many people said yes.
Well, now tell everybody, can you go through some of the names?
Oh man, so there are 100
amazing.
There are 112 women who are contributors, and then there are also, I conducted a survey of home cooks that included 375, I think, home cooks across the country. So, I mean, there is a huge range of women. Anna Gass, who's here with us tonight, legendary food writer Ruth Reichel, Hillel Echohawk, who is an Indigenous chef on the West Coast. There's Jen Castle and Blake Spalding in Utah at Hell's Backbone Grill. Ree Maciel. I'm looking at the contributor list now. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Cara Mangini, Deborah Madison, Martha Hoover, Carla Hall. And, you know, so many of these conversations, Gail Simmons, Julia Turshen, Kate Williams. When I think back to that time doing the research and I just reading the names and thinking back to the conversations that I had, honestly, I'm just filled with so much warmth. Like every single conversation that I had was so generous, and people were so honest and willing to share their experiences with me. I'm just so grateful.
So now you did all of the watercolor paintings.
I did.
They're so spectacular. It's just like this beautiful gift. But when did you do it, and how did you decide to do it?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know when I did it. No, I do know when I did it. I worked very, very hard, but I have two daughters. They're now 5 and 8. But when I started the project, they were 2 and 5. And like many women know who are balancing all of the parts of having a family and a career, it was definitely challenging. But I felt so passionate about this project that when I was working on it, which was often for 3 years, it was 10 hours of every day. I just lost track of time. It was such an honor to be able to bring my art to these stories, and it felt very much collaborative in terms of what I was illustrating. One of the really interesting things about making this book, I think that I learned along the way, is in terms of the design process, because I was working on the manuscript and sketching all of the art for the book first. I actually had the opportunity to, I sketched every image in the book. So everything in here was done in pencil first. And then the entire book was laid out with my sketches so that when it came time to do the actual full color watercolor illustrations, I knew, you know, exactly what I was painting and where it was going to go and what the scale would be and whether it would be spanning, you know, the whole page or just a small spot illustration. And that was, to me, that was a really interesting part of making the book, because there's so much content and there are so many different kinds of content in the book that it was really like a puzzle putting it all together. And when, you know, as a finished product, it feels like the art and the words go so seamlessly together. And I think that that's, at least from in my perspective, that is part of what makes it unique. I think that the art and the imagery and the words sort of all have equal weight on the page. And that was my, you know, hope from the beginning. So it's been really exciting to see it become a real thing and look at the pages and how they printed and see the art just, you know, get woven throughout the text.
Do you have, before we bring Anna on, do you have a favorite painting, a favorite page?
Ooh, well, I mentioned to you before we got started tonight that I painted all of the final paintings. Probably I had started just before lockdown in California in March of 2020. And so the majority of the paintings were made throughout the pandemic. And so I actually, while that was challenging in some ways because it was such an intense time and with young kids, our kids were home from school, obviously, and we were balancing all of the things that everyone was balancing and is still balancing. But I look back so fondly at that painting process because it was like a bright light in the midst of a really dark time. So I look back really fondly at painting all of them. But I think, let me see, I think that one of my favorite paintings was for an essay written by Leticia Landa, who is the deputy director of La Cocina, which is in San Francisco. And I painted, this is the illustration. And I think that one of the reasons I love this piece is because In her essay, she talks about the sort of actually similar to what I hope we get to talk to Anna about, the recipes that she sort of inherited from her family's Mexican heritage. And so in this case, I illustrated parts of her recipe that she mentions in the book, but also this textile that's in the background of the illustration is based on an image that she sent me that is a cloth, a textile that one of her grandmother's best friends brought to her as a wedding gift from Mexico. And so the reason that I point to this illustration is because it incorporates sort of pieces of her story as well as actual imagery that she sent me. But it was combining it all in one place that was really exciting for me.
Oh, everything. I love, I'm going to show one of your kitchen.
Oh, my old kitchen now.
Yes, your old kitchen, but oh my gosh. Oh,
There it is.
Everyone,
That's where it all started.
Yeah, it's so amazing. So we're going to get ready because now we're going to bring in Anna Gass and we're going to start some cooking and talk some more about food. So Anna,
can't wait.
Whole Foods, Mad Hungry, Martha Stewart Living on Me Media and Food 52. And she is the author of Heirloom Kitchen. So welcome, Anna Gass. We are so thrilled that you're here and welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored, especially RJ Julia. I am a Connecticut resident, so you are the bookstore. So excited to just be part of all of this, and obviously incredibly honored and humbled that I was chosen to be in this book. Lindsay talked about, I wanted to hear what she said about how she picked people, because I was literally just sitting in my desk one day and I get an email and it's from Lindsay and it's like, hi, I'm writing.
Hi, you don't know who I am.
Exactly. I'm writing this cookbook. I'm an artist and I'd like you to be part of it. And she included a small kind of like sample of what the book was going to be. And, after clicking on that link and just seeing her beautiful watercolor and what she was trying to do, I was like 1,000% yes, just tell me what you need me to do. And I just felt so excited to be part of this formidable group of women. I don't even necessarily felt like I deserved to be part of it, but I'll take it. And also what was so nice for me is the cookbook that I created is a contributor-based cookbook. It's not my recipes, it's the recipes of other women. So to now be on the other end of it and to be a contributor to this cookbook that included just all these amazing women, it was just, as I say, a win-win. So yeah, I love the book. I love the illustration. My favorite page, I just happened to be on it, but one of the questions that she asked was if you could have dinner with someone, living or dead, who would it be? And, I mentioned Maya Angelou because there's just an interesting connection for me. That's the page. I love, Lindsay, that you actually drew the cover of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. That is absolutely one of my favorite books. And it's funny because I really felt that was just, as a child, my first kind of taste or awakening to race relations, why we're different, why people feel different, and really woke me up. I grew up in a very, homogeneous Italian Irish town. And that really opened my world to a different perspective. And I think if I had to pinpoint one point in my life that led me to write a book about women from all over the country, that was it. So
wow.
Everything's really full circle. And Maya's grandmother was, had her own garden. My grandmother gardens. And I just felt, wow, if I could have dinner with one person, she would be it. And we would talk all about gardens and food and grandmas.
I would love to be at that dinner also. I mean, I would pretty much like to be at every dinner that was mentioned on this page, but especially that one. I studied American literature in my undergraduate life, and so I share your admiration of her work.
But anyway, without further ado, so one of the questions that Lindsay asked me was my favorite ingredient. So as a chef, I could name a million different ingredients, but if I'm being truly honest, what's incredibly important to me is family food, family heritage. I am unapologetically incredibly Italian, and I love Italian food. I was raised by an Italian immigrant mother, and my mom made her own sauce. And I love, without even talking, how you put it in a preservation jar, because that's what my mom did. She would just make loads and loads of sauce and put it in those jars. So that was lovely. Now, my mother's sauce is the base of so many Italian dishes. So we always have to have it on hand. It's our liquid gold. And I'm going to really quickly show you how to do it, because Italian food is very good, but it's also very simple and not many ingredients. Well, my mom's sauce is a little bit different, and I think that's why it's so special and great. So you're going to start with half a cup of extra virgin olive oil, and you're going to get that in a very little saucepan, very small saucepan. To that saucepan.
Does your mom know that you're sharing her recipe?
Well, it's in the cookbook.
Gonna ask.
She hasn't asked me for royalties yet, but yeah. So yes, she does. My mom is very proud, and you know, her hands are on the cover of my cookbook, so we call her the cover girl. Soon she'll have an agent. I don't know. Anyway, you're going to throw in 2 or 3 cloves of just smashed garlic into this oil that's heating up. And then you're going to take about 10 basil leaves, and you're just going to tear them and put them into this. See, my grandmother knew all about expensive infused olive oils before they were a thing. So that's exactly what you're doing here. You are creating an infused olive oil. You're getting
something that I didn't know. So what an amazing, I can't wait to do this.
It's so easy. And as per my Instagram followers, once they have this sauce and my mom's meatballs, they've never gone back to their old recipe. So yeah, so this is going to steep. Basically, think about like making a tea. You know, you're going to keep the heat on low. You're not looking to brown the garlic. You're not looking to burn up those basil leaves. You're just allowing all the delicious flavors of, really, to me, this smells like my summer garden. I have the crushed tomatoes. I have that basil infusing, and I just love the smell that it makes in my kitchen. So you're just going to let this kind of sit, and this is going to just infuse, and it's going to create a base flavor for your sauce. So it's just kind of doing its thing. Keep it on really low, and it'll tell you when it's ready, because you're just going to start to smell it. Another thing that you can do now, like Lindsay, I have small children, so I don't usually do this, but you can add crushed red pepper to this. And then you'll just get, you know, I like to do it. I can put a little, like a pinch in, and my kids won't notice. It just adds a nice little heat on the back of your, kind of on the back of your throat when you're eating it. Or you can make it fra diavolo. You can make it really, really hot and just go crazy with that. The other nice thing is, you know, this is where we poach our meatballs, which is another recipe that we share in the book. So meatballs go in to this sauce, and they cook in this sauce. Chicken Parmesan, lasagna. I don't know. We eat a lot of tomato sauce. What can I say? That's why we have those jars. So this is just going to go ahead and infuse. In the interest of time, we're going to pretend that this was 10 minutes. After that 10 minutes, your basil is going to be incredibly wilted, and your garlic is going to be all just really browned and soft. Now, like I like to say, the basil and the garlic, they have fulfilled their destiny. We don't need them anymore. So we're going to get a nice big pot. We're going to say thank you for coming to the basil and the garlic, and we're going to actually just drain it out. Okay. And I am telling you, this oil, you can put it in a jar and give it to friends as a infused olive oil, because that's basically what you did. And this now creates the base of your tomato sauce. So I'm going to turn this on. And now I'm going to add 8 cups of crushed peeled tomatoes that I blended to this.
And do you have are these canned tomatoes or are they fresh?
Well, these are actually canned. Our gardens are not doing so great this year, but we're hoping another couple weeks we'll have a whole bunch. My son, he's now 8, but at that time, 7-year-old son, decided to become a gardener during quarantine. So we created a garden at my house. My mother has always had a garden, but he wanted his own. And it was really nice because at the time we really weren't spending too much time with my parents. It was very hard for all of us.
Yeah.
But gardens are outside. So my parents could come over and just kind of be out in the dirt with him. And this is now our 2nd year of our garden. And he had my mother come over this morning. Every morning he gets up and he says, I need to check progress. And we go check our garden progress.
Love it. Okay, so in another scenario, you might be using 8 cups of fresh tomatoes blended.
Yes, absolutely.
Just depends.
Or, you know, whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Crushed, honestly, whatever you have in the cupboard is going to work, because now this sauce, by the way, we're done. This is it. This is the magic sauce. This is
Wow.
now in the pot. And you're going to let this cook. Oh, wait a minute. See what happens when I start talking? Couple more ingredients. It's not that easy. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. So that's going to go in. I love the tubes because they keep longer. I feel like whenever I get it out of the can, by the time I go to use it again, it's no good.
Yeah, I
I'm
love
all
that too.
about the tube. So that goes in. We're going to do a tablespoon of kosher salt, which might sound like a lot, but remember, this is 8 cups of sauce. And then you can always add more later. And then 1 teaspoon of fresh cracked pepper, which I cracked before. Give it a mix. Now you're going to look at this and say, girl, what did you do to me? This is oily. Do not worry about it. It's not going to be oily because this is going to cook. You're going to let it come to a boil. Then it's going to reduce to a simmer. Don't cover it completely. Always do like half lid like this. And you're done. Let this go. And in about an hour, you will have a condensed, really sweet, really delicious sauce. You can taste it for spice. You can even add chili flakes at the end if you don't think it's spicy enough. This is just a really fantastic sauce. And it's so simple. It's so simple, but that infused oil really changes it.
I have a question. When you are making batches of the sauce, are you making bulk batches? Like, do you keep this? Is there literally like an entire freezer shelf that's just stocked with the sauce?
Yeah. So what we do is this. Well, my mom and I go back and forth because sometimes like she'll call me up and she'll be like, do you have any sauce? I'm out of sauce. So we're always running frozen sauce back and forth to each other. By the way, she always wins. She always has more than I do. But no, I mean, I usually have like a rotation. So this is 8 cups. So this makes a good amount. So what this will end up being is I'll probably use half of it for a dinner and then the other half will get batched up and frozen. And then one of the ingredients in my mom's meatballs is actually sauce. That's another secret ingredient. The sauce goes in the meatball. It makes the most moist meatballs. And that like dates back to my great grandmother, her recipe. But yeah.
Well, and that's, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up.
Have on hand.
I'm glad you brought that up about the meatballs because, you know, that is a big part of what inspired you to write your book. And I would love for you to share a little bit about that because from what I've read, it sounds like that was a real journey through your own heritage for you, just like learning about the origin of that one recipe and sort of discovering for yourself that there was something more that you could know about it.
Well, you know, my situation is very similar to many people here in the United States, or really anywhere where you live in an immigrant home. So my grandmother was still in Italy and my great grandmother was deceased by the time I was born. So, you know, I really learned about these women through the recipes that my mother was cooking in our house because, you know, and I talk about this a lot in the book, immigrant women didn't come here and start making, pot roast and, I don't know, packed up food from the prepackaged food in the grocery store. They continue to cook their food, which is why we have the landscape of food that we do in this country, because everyone the way I kind of put it in the book is everyone stuck their spoon in the melting pot, but they didn't let go. So it was, I'm Chinese, I'm Japanese, I'm Russian, I'm Italian, I'm, African American, whatever it was. They came to this country, but they created their own little mecca within their home. And I think that's what made people feel safe and also just sane, because everything around them was different, the language, the people, the culture. So I learned all that stuff, but, it was all kind of like a pinch of this and whatever. So I grew up, I loved to cook. I had a whole corporate career, but I ended up back in the kitchen, just like my mom. And I realized I didn't know how to make any of her recipes. So learning these recipes created this incredible tether to the old country to learn why all these things came up and why we do things that the way we do and why, the sauce is this way and all these things. So then I ended up in all these other kitchens. And just like you said, talking to me and all of these amazing contributors that you had, you started making parallels to your own life. And what I said is, whether I was in the kitchen standing next to a Cuban woman, a Chinese woman, a German woman, it was like I was standing next to my own mom. The sentiment is the same. And I always say, we're really not that different. I don't care where you're from, a million miles away, you get in the kitchen with someone and you truly realize that we all have the same values, the same loves. I always say everyone loves their country and their mama, everybody. So once you realize those two principles, everything moves off of that, and food is a part of that. So I don't know. I think all of that kind of taught me these things.
Yeah.
In your book, everything in your book pointed to that, because all these women said the exact same thing. And the other thing I love about your book, and it's the same thing that I did when I went around the country cooking with women to get all this stuff, I had two criteria for the people that contribute to my book. They had to be a good cook, and they had to, three, good cook, had to be an immigrant, and had to be female, because I just really felt like all the best chefs in the world all talk about their mother. And it's funny, I was lucky enough, and I know he's a huge part of your bookstore, but Jacques Pepin penned a blurb for the back of my book. And we had to cut his blurb because it was so long. But he said something in it that didn't make the back, but it truly made me, when I read the blurb, I started crying. He said, I was raised by a woman that taught me all my life how to cook, and it created the man that I am today, the chef that I am today. So if you think about probably the most famous, most revered chef in the world, credits his mother. He doesn't credit, the chefs in, Paris or wherever he went. It's all started with his mother. So,
which is so often the case. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. When you were talking, it reminded me of one of the stories actually of from Why We Cook about Minara Begum and Emily Stagidis. I'm just going to show the illustration. Just when you were talking about immigrant stories and food, which is an interesting theme that came up throughout so much of the content in the book, that was something that I never could have planned or intentionally done from my perspective when I started out. But something that came up time and time again, which was exactly what you just said, Anna, about how powerful it is for people to come to this country or any country where they're immigrating and have something that keeps them connected to where they came from or who they came from. And in this profile that I wrote about Minara and Emily, theirs is a really interesting story. They started a nonprofit in Detroit called Bandu Gardens. And And what I love about their story is that their organization was started based on their friendship. Minara immigrated from Bangladesh with her family, and Emily is an American woman, and they were neighbors, and their whole relationship and friendship was formed around the garden that they planted with all these seeds that they brought from Bangladesh, and they would invite each other to each other's houses. And then it formed this friendship before they could even communicate in language. They didn't speak the same language. And so out of that has come this beautiful and powerful organization that is helping Bangladeshi women cultivate their gardens and then connect their gardens to local restaurants who want to buy their produce. So it's all connected. And I just think that, I think that is one of the most powerful things about food, not to say that everyone is the same by any means, but just that it can be such a place where people can come together and always have something in common. You can always talk about something.
Well, I always say that food is the universal language. So we all need food, we all cook. And it brings up a subject of the change in food during COVID and how the food industry totally changed. Everybody changed. How did the two of you, each of you, see the change during COVID in food and maybe in your own kitchen?
Do you want to go first, Anna?
Well, personally, for me, I didn't realize, I know it's almost embarrassing to say, but I didn't realize how wasteful I was. And I don't know if that's the right word. I don't necessarily throw food out, but what I found was, I was always just in this notion, well, oh, this recipe calls for ginger. Let me go run to the store and get it. Or I always make this with this kind of pepper. Maybe as a chef, I'm almost more guilty of this, running, to get that Serrano chili, whatever. And of course, especially in the beginning, we were very fearful to go to the grocery store. There's a lot of people, you have this mask on. I mean, at one point it was like wearing gloves. It was like insane. Like sometimes I look back on it, it feels like almost like a dream, like what we went through. And so like my grocery, and you don't understand, like the grocery store for me is like a sacred place. Like I love food shopping.
Yes.
I love walking the aisles.
Same.
Don't bring my children with me.
Me too.
It's like me time, which is not normal probably, but for me, I love the grocery store, reading labels, whatever. And that was taken away from me. And I was like, all right, I'm home. I made this weird rule that I would only go to the grocery once every 2 weeks. Don't ask. No, it had no logical sense. It was just something I had decided. So every night it was like, okay, nope, this is what I got. I'm going to throw it together and we're going to make it work. And it always did. So I'm thinking, how much gas am I saving? How much time am I saving? I'm being so much more creative in the kitchen. So as a chef, I was kind of like, I can't believe that it took a pandemic for me to learn I don't need to run to the grocery store for a knob of garlic. So that was a big thing. And I think as far as just what I've seen universally is I've seen people become more open to cooking. One thing in your book that I love that Samin Nosrat said is the one thing she loves about cooking is there's always tomorrow. And I think that's why I went into food, because one, I definitely have ADD. So the fact that every day is different in the kitchen, it works for me. And also there's always something to learn. So I tell someone like, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to burn it and you're going to order pizza. You're going to order pizza anyway. So try to cook something first. And it might taste terrible this time, but next time it's going to taste a little bit less terrible. And the third time it's going to be delicious. So just get in there. And I always say, and it's funny because you actually are an artist, but I always say, I'm not an artist. I can't carry a tune, but I can cook. And the reason I can cook is unlike an artist or Whitney Houston, who are born with these talents, anyone can cook. You just have to get in the kitchen and try. So that's what I always tell people. I'm like a plumber. I just kept practicing until I could fix the pipe.
I think I could say the same thing about painting, that probably anyone could paint. I mean, it might not be how you want it to be, but you can definitely do it, you know?
Okay.
And I mean, I think there are similarities there. I totally, I can identify with so much of what you just said about cooking in the pandemic. I think I would add that personally, on a personal level, like cooking through the pandemic and making the book and painting these illustrations was a really powerful thing for me, because it was sort of a chance to really, because it came at the end of the process of making the book and we were going through such an intense period, that I would be doing many of the same things that you were just talking about, Anna, like scrapping together whatever we had left from the last grocery run, which was also few and far between, purposefully, and then going to my studio and painting these images that sort of honored women who, in so many different scenarios, have done that in so many different ways, right? Have just like made it work. And so I think there was a real connection there for me, and it made me less, it made me just so full of gratitude that I was able to do that for my family, for myself, to nourish us in that way. And it made me really grateful for the food that we had access to. And it made me really aware of all of the parts of the food system that lead up to like having a beautiful yellow pepper on my kitchen counter. You know, I mean, aware of parts of the food system and the people that make that system go every single day, who were in such vulnerable positions through the pandemic. Just aware of all those different pieces that come together on our kitchen tables every night. And so I think I was simultaneously like processing that in a new way during the pandemic. And also, you know, it was a highly anxious time, as you talked about, but also just, I felt so fortunate to be able to continue to feed my family and to continue to have sometimes to put together a meal that felt satisfying and sometimes artful. And I mean, I had a sourdough starter that I like really invested in and then totally gave up on, just like everyone else. So, you know, I think that, and I talk about this in the introduction to the book also, that like you, what draws me back, pandemic or outside of pandemic, what draws me back to cooking is just how much there is to learn. And that's really what started it all. And I think that, you know, of course I have my stressful times in the kitchen. Like there are days that I don't feel like cooking dinner. Like let's be clear. But I think that from a big picture view, what I love about it is that it presents that opportunity to connect with other people and to learn other people's stories and to build not just your own knowledge and skill set, but also to grow your empathy and understanding of so many other people's stories through this, you know, vehicle that we all take part in every day.
So do you have a first memory? What's each of your first memory of food or being in the kitchen where you're like, oh, I really like this?
Where I really liked it? Oh, I did. That's not where I was going in my head.
But, or where you know, you're like, your first experience could be a terrible one, but what was your first experience in the kitchen, or your first memory of food?
I think for me, I've had a lot of conversations with my mom about this over the last 3 years, especially, but my mom was a little bit ahead of her time. I was born in 1980. And so she was very into whole food eating at that time. And she was, you know, reading Diet for a Small Planet and doing yoga with us in the basement. And I think that I joke about it now, but that foundation of sort of understanding what I was eating and how it fueled my actual physical body was something that was instilled from like a very young age for me. And I didn't always like it. I mean, what I was laughing about is that I was thinking about my lunch boxes, you know, like in second grade, and what they would have in them, which was often like carob covered raisins and crunchy homemade peanut butter and carrot sticks, you know, and no one would ever trade me for what they had in their lunchbox. And so my mom and I joke about that a lot. And she has, especially since having grandchildren, she's really, you know, loosened a lot of her restrictions. But I do think that as much as I joke about it, it really gave me a strong sense of how to fuel my body and what food actually does for us, in a literal way.
Anna, how about you?
That was so deep. Mine is ridiculous. So I just remember my first food memory was, so when we were little, my mom never wanted us in the kitchen. Like, again, as a grandmother now, it's like, oh, I want to make cookies with the kids, send them over. This is not the woman that raised me. So when I was a kid, it was like, get out of the kitchen. I need to cook. And one weekend, my dad decided that my mom was going to teach my sister and I how to make a lasagna. So we both get in the kitchen with her, and it actually went really well, and we had a lot of fun. My dad took a picture of my sister and I holding the lasagna. I don't even know, like we were like presenting it, and we still have this photo. And it's like the one time mom let us cook, we had to memorialize. And you guys are, and I'm also born in 1980. It wasn't like the cell phones all the time, the selfies. Like when dad pulled out the camera, that was a big deal. So we do have this picture to memorialize and to always remember my sister and I holding a lasagna, smiling ear to ear in the kitchen. No idea how it tasted, but that was kind of the first time that my mom let us into the kitchen. And we joke today because, you know, food is just so in fashion and it's so in vogue, right? And, you know, what I really admire so much about our moms is it was just another thing on the to-do list, getting dinner on the table, just like mopping the floor, doing the laundry, and getting the food. Nobody was snapping photos of the finished dish.
I think that it's something that moms of our generation really underestimate about themselves, actually. I've talked to a lot of women, like my peers in my age range, and we talk about that a lot, about how they were, our moms were doing all of that and working and picking us up from school somehow. And I mean, there were all these things, and there wasn't, you know, it was pre-social media, it was pre so much cookbook culture. It just was a different time. And I think that also even when I talk
and delivery, I don't know about you, Lindsay,
yeah,
but, you know, my mom, we didn't order, like when my parents ordered a pizza, it was like,
yep,
oh
it was
God,
a huge deal. Yeah. Yeah. It was like a vacation. It was crazy. Yeah. I think that, I think it's really interesting, even still talking to my mom or, you know, my aunts about how they pulled all that off. And they kind of don't even, it's like they can't even really put words to it, because it was just like, what, we did it. It was just like what we did.
So what are you doing differently with your kids? Are you inviting them into the kitchen?
Yes. So, you know, I think it's like we all just kind of do things differently. So it was hard at first because I think by nature, my kitchen is my sanctuary. Like if you come to my house for the holidays and you say, what can I do to help? I say, get a glass of wine.
Leave me alone.
And leave me alone. So I'm definitely someone that just kind of, I'm a control freak and I love to do my own thing. But when my daughters were really little, they were just very into baking and interested. I mean, look, I'm always in the kitchen more than my mom because I recipe test as my job. I wrote a cookbook. That was all. So, I mean, I call the kitchen my office. So like when the kids are like, Mom, where are you? I'm like, I'm in the office. They know I'm in front of the stove making something. So I think they kind of realize like, we want to be with Mom. So that's where she is. So I definitely broke that chain of not letting them in. And I really do. And my 8-year-old son is really into cooking and really into cutting things. So we go slow, but you know, and anything that comes out of his garden, he also must be part of cooking. So.
Yes. Yeah. I'm in a very similar situation. I have our my kids are 5 and 8, and they're right in the mix all the time. I mean, sometimes I'm not as, it's not where I do the majority of my professional work, obviously. And so, I think that there is more, I have a bit more tolerance just for like the chaos of it all, because I don't have to turn it into something that is my actual job at the end of it. But I think that, there are definitely moments when I like to be alone cooking. But then there are other times when I feel, in much the same way that I learn from cooking, that they learn from cooking. And when they do it, they are so much more invested in eating it and trying it and being experimental. And then they remember, they're like, do you remember when we made that thing, and how we did it and how long it took, and remember how it got messed up and then we fixed it. And so I think there is a lot of inherent learning that goes into that process, not just about the end result, but also about, taking risks and trying something different, and all the processes. I think it gives them such an appreciation for all of the things, not just that we do for them as their caregivers, but also, again, going back to like the farmers who we got the tomatoes from. And I think when they are exposed to all the parts of it, it just gives them such appreciation for that.
I think the pandemic was also a nice, always trying to find silver linings. It was a nice wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people. But even I did say this to my kids, because in the beginning, I mean, no one even wanted to order takeout. They were afraid of surfaces and everything. So in the beginning, everyone was like, really had to cook. And I said to my kids, I go, I've been telling you this, but now you know it for true. Like, cooking is a survival skill. You can't always count on calling up and getting a meal, or even being able to, maybe make something frozen, because if you didn't go get, the frozen whatever, I don't really buy a lot of frozen foods like fish sticks, I don't know, chicken nuggets, whatever. If you don't have that stuff, like, you're going to have to figure it out. And one thing that you said before that really just, I admired what you said about like the food chain and everything. And another really important thing, when we were watching the news and we saw the food lines, and I did take a moment to explain it to my kids and say, look, you might be eating kale tonight because that's what we got, but you're eating. And that was really important, that, food insecurity is a real thing. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And the pandemic, we all got to see it, for better or for worse. Yeah. And I think that was important for people to see that there are people that are not as, they can't just say, oh, I don't like the way this tastes, I'm not going to eat it. So a lot of good things, I think, came out of 2020. I don't want to go back. Yeah. Hopefully we're not going to go back.
Yeah.
But
fingers
I think
crossed.
A lot of good things came out.
Yeah.
I want to ask some fun questions. So what's your favorite gadget in the kitchen?
Go ahead.
I have to say, I mean, it's a little controversial in my kitchen, but I think it's the mandolin. Controversial because of our fingertips and everyone being on guard about that at all times, but it's my personal favorite tool because I feel like it makes me feel fancy, and it ends up like everything that I use it to process just ends up tasting so much better. And I don't know, I like it. Yeah.
I would say my zester. I don't know why. I'm a big lemon zest, orange zest. I feel like everything tastes better with a little zest.
Do you ever put it in the sauce?
No.
So one of the questions too in the book is, what's your favorite ingredient? So, Anna, we know one of yours, but do you have another one?
I do. I guess it's still kind of related to my family, but I love dried oregano. Very, very early food memory. My grandfather in Italy he used to work on building bridges and highways and all this stuff. But at lunchtime, they would go into the mountains and have their lunch, and they would pick oregano. So then he would come home and dry it. So it was something that he would actually bundle up and send to us in the US. So we always had dried oregano, and dried oregano from Italy. I mean, if the aroma fills the room. So I don't obviously have that in my kitchen, but I always just have organic dried oregano. And that I will put in my sauce. I love sprinkling it on pizza, steak. I mean, I just feel like whenever you just don't know what spice to use dried oregano. You can't go wrong.
Oh man, I'm never gonna think about oregano the same way after that story. I think that I would say fresh herbs of all kinds are high on my list, but I think that in terms of like a pantry ingredient, I think garbanzo beans might be my number one.
Oh,
Because I use them in so many different places. I mean, they're so good in soups. I bake them and put them on salads. I make hummus. There's just so many different ways to use them. And I feel like there's always like some form of a garbanzo bean in my fridge that I can add to something. And I think that it's just, I don't know, yeah, that's one of my favorites.
so what's your favorite newest like recipe you've done or food that you've discovered?
Ooh, I need to think about that. Favorite newest recipe or food. Do you have one, Anna?
So it's kind of my own. I
Okay.
created I put it up on Instagram. It did very well. I did an upside down pizza.
Oh, I saw that. I want to
Oh,
try it. I
It's
definitely want to
pretty
try it.
cool. I'm very proud of it. I can't believe it worked. You take a cast iron skillet, you put in all your toppings first, raw. I put onions, garlic, I put some canned artichokes I had. Then you lay down your mozzarella cheese. Then you put your sauce on top of the cheese. Then you put your raw dough on top. Seal it up and bake it. Take it out, cool it, and flip it.
It sounds
really?
amazing. So you make it, did you say
I
a
actually,
cast
people
iron
say
skillet?
this is a trick. I go, it's on video. I videotaped it. Look on Instagram. I only speak the truth.
Wow. Okay, well, I don't think I have anything as exciting as that, but I do think that something I've been doing a lot of is pickling veggies, and it's not really a recipe per se, but I do think that it adds a lot to pretty much everything that I eat. So whether it's like something on the grill, I've been eating mostly plant-based for quite a while, and I think that it really kind of ups the flavor profile of a lot of vegetarian food. So I'm kind of interested in deepening my pickling skills, I would say.
I like it. So as a final question, what advice or what hope do you have for the younger generation, these kids your kids, but kids in their 20s? What is your hope or your wish or your advice for them in this food world?
I'll let you go first, Anna.
Okay, so my first thing is, I have a lot to say about this. I'll keep it short. First of all, get off TikTok. I'm not making frozen honey. That doesn't work. Just get off TikTok. But all seriousness, get in the kitchen. You need to know how to cook. At some point, you're not going to be home with your mother. Processed foods are terrible for you. They will not sustain you. They're full of chemicals. They were in the 70s. They still are. Just learn a couple of basic recipes and go.
Very practical. I love it. So I would say that I think what's hopeful about this moment is that there are more women at more visible positions throughout every part of the food industry. And I think that going back to what inspired me to make the book was that I couldn't find a book that had all of those people highlighted in one place or brought all those voices together. And I think that through the research and getting to know this community of women and all the women that I don't know yet that I've read about, you know, it goes back to that, if you can see it, you can be it. And I think that that's what gives me hope at this moment, that I do think that there is a shift afoot, and that people that have not historically been in leadership positions are achieving and have been achieving things for quite some time, but are starting to fill those leadership positions, and that will bring change. And I think that that makes me feel really hopeful. I also just think that, you know, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that food is a place that that everyone can be part of in some way. And I think that when we teach our children that they can be active, like what Anna said, and be empowered in terms of feeding themselves and making choices about how they do that and what they buy and what they make, that creates a very different scenario than not being in control of that at all. And I think that there is so much to learn from that, and so much empathy that can come out of that experience for kids as they are children, and then as they grow. But there's a lot of power in that. So yeah, that's what gives me hope.
I hope you two realize how amazing you are. This has just been an honor and a privilege for RJ Julia Booksellers to have you both, that you agreed to do this. This has been
Thank you.
Spectacular evening, a beautiful event. And I don't know if you guys wanted to say any last words to our audience, because they were fabulous too. I'll let you both give the final word.
Well, I'll let Lindsay have the final word. I will just say again to Lindsay, thank you so much. Books are forever. So I will be forever part of this group. And I'm so honored and humbled, like I said before. So thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for listening to us, you know, wag our chins for the last hour.
I want to be in your kitchen to smell what it smells like.
It does. It smells really good.
I think I might have to see what I have in my own pantry and try to make that when we are finished here. Thank you so much for having us, RJ, Julia, and Karen. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. Anna, thanks for being part of this and for being here tonight and sharing your mom's recipe. I just love how the circles continue to expand. And I think that that is, you know, it's very surreal to see your work kind of culminate in this way and then go out into the world in book format. I know you can identify with that, Anna. And I think that there, you know, I would be lying to say that it wasn't scary at parts to see my book baby go out into the world and not know what it would garner. And I think that I just have been continuously so thrilled that people want to engage in this conversation. And so that's what I'm just really grateful that it's out there and that people are hopefully taking it as an opportunity, not just to learn about other women and what they're doing in the world, but also to reflect on cooking in their own lives. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, everyone. And please do not forget to purchase a copy of Why We Cook. And I see the Heirloom Kitchen too, Anna's book in the background. Don't forget to buy one of those too, because it's spectacular. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
And we'll see you at the bookstore.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.